Goodbye last week, Bob.
Yeah, it's like I'm done. I'm done with you guys. Oh boy, it's been a little bit of a learning curve. Okay, well, welcome back. We'll actually, if there are things that we'd like to readdress from last week or continue on, these these sessions are what I tried to lay them out was mostly just topics for us to talk through, and then monthly have someone come on and talk about what they're doing and do a deep dive. You'll see by the schedule that there's a lot of folks that wanted to come on, so we'll have some extra deep dives, which is good. Um, just a reminder from an antitrust policy, we don't talk about sales terms, pricing, refusal to deal, those type of things. So we all stay safe, and just we know how to deal with each other and talk about things. Um, so last week we were talking about, we just started a conversation around AI, and we all kind of took a turn talking about how we're dealing with AI, what we're using it for. We didn't actually get into each of these levels, probably in future calls or even today, if you like, if you feel like going into those, the different ways of using AI from personal productivity to organization, and then moving into product development, and then having AI actually in the product itself, that if you're building something. Um, Today was a little bit more of a deep dive into certain issues around that, but we can talk about anything. And then I also have an example I could show you about AI in product development that might be interesting. So next week we'll be off. I'm going to take a little bit of a vacation, and then on the 14th, I guess I met Swami maybe about 6 years ago during the FDA pilots. He's from Triggerware. They've been doing AI for a long time before AI became in everybody's pocket now. So I thought it might be interesting to talk to Swami a little bit about what's happening from his end of the world. So first of all, is anything, I know that we just got abruptly cut off last week when we were actually seemed to be getting into some interesting discussions. Anything that you'd like to bring up again from last week or talk through?
Well, the only thing I'll mention is obviously at the ARM conference, anybody that was joining the call, right? Every conference you go to, you hear a lot about AI. Um, so, I was into about my first day and a half of sessions and I had to speak. So I thought I would give some reference to AI, but I kicked off my AI introduction saying, I am going to mention AI. I'm not going to talk about artificial intelligence. I'm going to start with actual intelligence, and I'm going to ask everybody to finish my sentence because we were talking about the bill only process in healthcare, which is the wonderful process where things show up in surgery and then you get a bill.
Mm.
So I said, I'm going to say it. I'm going to start a phrase, and you're going to finish it for me, and we're going to test actual intelligence. And I said, two wrongs don't make a. And I paused. And the
Mhm.
audience appropriately responded, right. And I said, good, we're doing good. I said, now how does that connect to this bill only presentation? And I said, the problem in bill only is if the vendor creates documentation and we create documentation and they match, in bill only speak, that's a good thing. So we pay.
Mm.
But we're finding because the documentation could actually be wrong on both sides and it matches, that we don't want to automatically just say match equals pay. So the flip side of that is two rights could equal a wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just wanted to introduce to the team that just solving the transactional work, and some people on this call may know Rhett Shuri that was at Abbott forever and then went to W.L. Gore. He started up an ANSI standards process to try to create almost like what we did in DSCSA with the blueprint, right? How would we make the data more interoperable and more standardized so that everybody could, get the data in and out of systems faster? And that was the context for that presentation. Um, But, I just wanted people to realize, like, just because we automate getting to the match, the tribal knowledge, and my first encounter with the tribal knowledge system was a person that works in our OR data team that was a surgical tech for 18 years. And she's looking at this bill only documentation that says K wires equal K wires, but no caps, which are the little protectors they put on the end of the K wires when they do fixations, external fixations. So that was where this concept of, the two wrongs don't make a right, because the documentation was right, but it was wrong, right from a matching perspective.
Okay.
So, that's a different problem to solve. But I try to encourage the group. We're going to be able to accelerate getting to that match. What we're not going to be able to accelerate is how do we determine if the match is correct? Because that data sits right now in humans. So this expression of AI and humans in the loop, we're going to have to work on that, right? We're going to have to figure out how these humans know these things and try to see if there's ways we could build that data set to help us. But it was a very current use of AI and a discussion about AI, so I just wanted to share it with the group today. So I hope you didn't mind that little segue.
Yeah, it used to be that if you created a really good presentation, people would just believe it. Do you think that we're getting to that with AI, that after a few 3 or 4 positive interactions with it, that you tend to get lazy and believe what it's spitting out at you?
I think that's the hazard, right? Because things that match, that's easy, right? The things that match that shouldn't be a match, and the knowledge that you need to figure that out with sits in somebody's brain, not in a large language model. That's not easy.
Right.
And there's a lot of tribal knowledge in healthcare. This is not an industry that has worked diligently to make sure that if it's important, we document it, right? And if we change it, we redocument it. That's not the basis for healthcare process control.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Not a foreign term. It's a very popular term. It probably ranks second to the word silo. Workarounds is potentially somewhere between silo and tribal knowledge from a process perspective.
Yeah, I'll show later a little bit of process where knowledge is being captured. And I think in the past, or even now, documentation of anything is just such a almost a futile thing. No one's going to read it. 400-page document. It's hard to keep it up to date, that type of thing. And that might be where AI is helpful. Of course, you have to deal with hallucinations and things like that, but I guess you have to deal with that anyhow in people sometimes.
Yes.
I'm going to roll to some questions if any of them provoke you.
Yeah, maybe on that hallucination.
Yeah.
I think this is what humans will do. It's the tool. It makes it easy. It's making it simple, and it produces, right? But I think it was Kevin Dean who said, like, AI is not really creating; it's just copying, right? And I'm not necessarily fully on that part of the spectrum, but I think what I just listened to a podcast this morning and got just going over how the internet is just really all, it used to be bots a lot, but now it's all this content that's generated artificially. And people, and of course, these various algorithms, right, through social media, and so that you really get infiltrated and with all this information and manipulated, right? And then the flip side of this was, some doctors on our side said that even 4 years ago, this term was popular then called model collapse, right? And it was the notion that we don't have enough good data to really keep improving these AIs, right? Well, I think the proof was given that they really did improve, right? But the question does now, be on the table on what data does it train, and it more and more starts to train on its own data.
Mm.
And then I also heard about these folks in Anthropic, right, who try to do AI and research, like meaning the AI does the research, right? And that is just another level of difficulty and things like that. I'm not really deep into. I cannot speak too much for it, but or about it. But I think it's just what they're putting forward is this notion based on the work that they're doing. This notion of every large enterprise do their own model, and we kind of in the beginning had these thinking too, right? We even tried to, coordinate the different company models, right, with research topics and, and federate them. We use the blockchain to synchronize and all that stuff, right? And it just seems to be, an interesting kind of wave that, or loop maybe rather, where you see these early ideas kind of getting shut down. And then 4 years later, they start kind of coming up again. But I do think that as enterprises or even society starts to really needing to trust these things more, you gotta have to have some insights like you would with an expert, right? You would go, where was this person trained, right? What kind of opinion does this person have, and so forth, right? That kind of seal or that kind of pedigree or whatever you want to call it, will have to be important, right? And so yeah, it's just interesting when you look into at the end of the day, guess what? It's a data question. It's the question of data that you actually know it's good or maybe not the quality. You must know the quality of it in order to start determining the quality of what these reasoning engines do about it, right?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's interesting what you just said about if you were to hire someone, you would look into their background, you would do a little research on them to understand where they're coming from, and then you could decide whether you can deal with whatever you found. I find myself doing that with the AI. As I ask it to do tasks, I also look at what angle it's coming from and what it's pulling from. And then if it could still do the job, then it does the job. If it's being biased in some way or being, overly going off in weird directions, then I need to put constraints around them. So I guess building it.
I think I mean, what you explained, Bob, right, is I think you are in perhaps a more sort of controllable kind of use case area, right, with it. When it gets into, write the marketing campaign or execute the marketing campaign and things like that, right? And you let it go, like you let it actually do things. You cannot, this notion of the human in the loop is always so scary, right? Like, I don't want to just be in the loop, like, CC me or no, I need to be in control. How can you, right? So, so it's certainly an interesting kind of, aspect to get yourself into. What I wanted to add is what one of the better values I started to get from it, and I'm using a lot of Claude stuff, Anthropic, and where it got really a big step on my side with usefulness on this is really when I started to do more skills or before I ask or make it to generate something, I create maybe 4 or so MD files by which I'm explaining these boundaries and the way I want this to look like, and the way I want this to sound, right? And I truly got much better results that way as well, right? So it's kind of like really the prompt window is tempting. You should only put there, read this file, all instructions are in this file, and from there to others, right?
Yeah, I started building the skills because maybe a month ago, that was like the big thing, build all these skills, and somebody publishes 400 skills and everybody's downloading every single one of them. Um, and then I stopped doing that because it was just too much work for me. And
Yeah.
so I started telling the AI, look, if you need a skill, go find it and let's talk about it. But I'm not your skill nanny. But maybe I'm missing something. There's probably some nuances in doing that.
Oh yeah, that's
I
funny.
don't think you're missing anything there, Bob. It takes you need a curator who can direct an AI to the appropriate authoritative material to build up a skill. So, for example, if you wanted to build an AI that was fully cognizant of GS1 standards, you would need somebody at GS1 to basically feed in all of the standards documents, all of the application guides, all of the appropriate reference material. Because when you rely on the default settings, the default AI for GS1 standards, it gets it wrong. And because AIs are first and foremost conversational agents, they don't take correction. They'll have a conversation about the correction. So when I pointed out in the very early days of ChatGPT, hey, you've got the definition of a GS1 company prefix wrong, it had a conversation with me that suggested to me that it was going to take the authoritative reference material I pointed it to and feed it back into its engine to correct itself. 2 years later, it was still giving me the same answer because it was developed to have a human conversation, but not necessarily take action based on that conversation. So all of these, and any skill, any specific skill needs a subject matter expert to do the appropriate construction of the AI to feed in the appropriate reference material to build that skill. And we can't do it all individually.
Yeah, from an efficiency point, you're right. If it came from the actual experts, I could show you. I'll show you later a build out where I did ingest all the GS1 standards and then built an application based on them. And you have to remind, I find it interesting that there are these, at least with Claude, there are memory docs and other docs that you can teach it when it does something wrong, tell it, don't do that again. That was wrong. This is how it should go. And it puts it into that memory, and it's pretty good. Although every once in a while I hear it kind of regresses a little bit.
Yeah, I just checked my notes. I don't think I mentioned an AI activity that we were trying to do at Geisinger in last week's call. But it was surrounding UiPath that our RPA team, robotic process automation team, was using, published a list of large language models that they said these are, been vetted, they're accessible, use them or lose them. And they asked us to review the list. And in that list was packing slips. And anybody that's been trying to work on, supply chain receiving processes through the years has probably, experimented a little bit with trying to use OCR technology to scan packing slips and try to get the data off a packing slip to reduce human data entry. That was a genesis, right? But I will say this, in our first attempt at trying the large language model, the OCR plus AI was way better than it was 10 years ago without the AI, but it's not perfect. So it needs train. And that was the conclusion of our first test. So the conversation led to, well, how would we get a more variant source of all the packing slips so that if we were to feed them into the model and see if we could help teach the model to be better at recognizing And I said, that's an interesting challenge. So I asked the RPA team, I said, um, would you be willing to do that, right? Is that what you're looking for? You want to learn how to train the models? And they said, yeah, that's kind of one of the sub goals that we'd be after. And I said, well, okay, then there could be a win-win for both of us, because if you can help me solve the manual entry and I can help you solve how to train a model, then that could be the win-win. So I said, I'll do some data analytics to see if I can find more variation in the packing slips, or at least identify the vendors that we could go look at their packing slips and say, okay, that would be a variant of how you'd receive a packing slip. So in that data analytics process, I got the report back from the analyst and I went, oh, this isn't good. I may not be able to hold up my end of the deal, because it turned out the largest volume of packing slips that we got was from our prime distributor. And because when we went from Lawson to Workday, we didn't finish the automation with the 856 ASN EDI transaction. And if I took that volume out of the equation and just use rudimentary EDI, we would remove most of the burden, right? The next level under that, because that was in the thousands, was one line packing slips. So somebody opens up the box, opens up the packing slip. It's one item, quantity, one purchase order, very simple. And I'm not so sure the human couldn't beat the robot.
Yeah.
Right. And then after that, it was a whole series of just, 2 lines or more, but the volumes just dropped off the cliff to the point where it may not even make sense to do the development. But I promised the RPA team that I'd help them, right, to see if this, because I could grade their large language model ability to, capture the information pretty easily with the technique we developed. But I may not get a win. They may get the win. I may not. But it goes back to the old principle we learned in engineering, right? Should you do it or could you do it? And when you actually define the problem and use good data, not opinion or assumption or jump to conclusion, that's kind of the way this story is evolving, right? But I'll keep you updated on it. It's probably something we'll continue to do. But it was just a very interesting, use of, like early on attempt at using AI at Geisinger in a very real process that, a lot of people do across the world, right? Everybody has receiving lines.
Yeah. I was starting to get concerned that the things that you teach AI, it disappears. It's inside the AI now. You don't have it anymore. You're not managing it. So I started to fool around with using ontologies and knowledge maps, so that the AI drives the knowledge back to something that you keep. So you could replace the AI with a different AI with the same ontology and knowledge map, and I haven't tested this yet, whether I get the same result, but at least the knowledge that's being, gained from going through this process is not in some amorphous AI somewhere. You actually can retain it into things that you could look at, you can inspect, you could run a SQL against it to look at things. You could create reports and bring it back to the business people and say, is this really how the business runs? And then the AI is just it doesn't have to be that intelligent. It just has to know how to do something that you want that be done based on those two pieces of information, let's say.
Yeah, I'd have to ask our team if they actually can set aside the model, right? The LLM, or whether it, like you said, it just goes back in to help everybody's model. But I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question, Bob.
Yeah, if you turn it.
Well, when you interactively, use the model, which probably most of us do, right, rather than programmatically, then you get all the chats, right? I mean, most of them behave like chatbots and keep memory on the side, right? Quote, right? So are you saying that is insufficient? Or I mean, or in other words, it would just, or you just say that that data you cannot download yourself and keep it somewhere.
You could download it, and so I use, and I could bring up a diagram to show you how I do it. But so I use a business ontology in each of the projects. So that ontology either, for example, for the folks here, knows how a hospital runs or knows how a food supply chain runs or something else. So that's different ontologies. And then there's the knowledge map, which now takes it down a level and says, in this project, there are SQL Server, there's Power BI, a whole bunch of stuff. How do we connect an ontology to those physical things? And then there are session logs that take place and decision logs that handle the day-to-day building and discuss the chat that goes back and forth between me and the AI. But at the end of the day, all of that gets scanned to see, is anything valuable here to go into the knowledge map or into the ontology? So we keep the essential things that are important, 3 months from now. And all those things are still there, so we can do an audit to say, how did we get to this point where we think that, patient transport actually works like this? We can go back and audit it and see through all that, what all the session logs to see how we got to that point. And so I also run like a monthly validation. It goes through it and from different points of view to say, does this really make sense? Or one's job is to actually challenge everything.
So maybe what you're saying is, instead of just letting it say, hey, take clues from the memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
The history of the past responses it gave, you sort of insert a human curated step by which you decide what you actually kind of consider new gospel or whatever, new theory, new proven theory or whatever, or axioms, whatever you want to call it, and then bring it into a file that you always have it, use as either skills or as background information on how it should actually analyze something.
Right. Yeah. And that way I could go to the business owner, somebody understands what transport is, and provide them what's in the ontology, the business ontology in their area. And can you verify this? Do we need to adjust this?
Yeah.
From the knowledge map, I could go to the technical folks and say, hey, does the SQL work? It says the SQL is in line with this. What do you think? And then I think, and probably the next couple of weeks, I'll test this. I think I could unplug the AI and pull a different one in and still be effective.
Yes.
Or the AI could just go away. Like, Fable went away for 5 weeks. I was in the middle of a project and it just went.
Well, that's why you just bring up the open source, right? The open weight ones, right? Yeah. No, I think that's very cool, Bob. I mean, that's very, 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 a very good sort of almost engineered approach to dealing with the undeterministic, behavior of these AI outputs. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. It allows me to generate something of value and then regenerate it without, with a high level of confidence that it's never going to be the same exact thing, but it'll be close enough that it's not going to be shocking to anybody that sees it and says, oh, now you changed everything. I don't even know where any of my tools are or anything like that.
So, I mean, that's, I think, in line with, most of the token burning happens on the so-called diffusion logic, right? Just where it tries to figure out what the heck you mean, right?
Yeah.
And I keep saying more and more, and you see this in the coding world as well, right? Where they're referring to these sort of DSLs, right? Domain specific languages by which they use a formal mechanism to describe what they want. So like put a math problem there rather than a wording, right? And I started therefore to be very interested in diagramming, right? I came across the DSL there. I mean, there's several out there, And now this interesting notion is where you feed it a basically looks like code, right? And say, I want you to analyze this. Is there anything that can be optimized and things like that, right? And it becomes much more denser in the way it veers from just interpreting images, right? So the same thing happens for software, right? So you start seeing finally this sort of requirements engineering that never was really done because it was too elaborative, right? To start getting into, formulate your code that you want, in a DSL type of way so that you get much better, regeneration of the code for it by using other models, as you just said before.
Yeah. And I think we've always tried to document things throughout our lives, and it turns into garbage because you just can't reread it. It just is so insanely boring, and you just start going cross-eyed. But the AI can go through it in minutes, or sometimes it gets big enough that it takes a little bit long.
I will have to jump off a little earlier today as well. But maybe could I just switch gear a little bit into supply chain related AI uses, or like this notion, maybe that's more on the commerce side, right? Where these, there's even protocols now, right, out there for like Target and Google, and so created these, e-commerce type of standards. Does anybody see a path there where it's really sort of like everything all collapsed together into one model that knows what needs to be ordered when to tell the other model on the supply chain, right, to start, processing it?
There was a speaker at ARM from General Mills, very similar to conversations I've heard when like Walmart starts to use AI in their logistics processes. And it was interesting because the woman speaking said they boiled it down to the truck had to present to the human a very simple decision point after doing its analytics. Move the truck or keep the truck where it's at. Because in logistics, right, either the truck's full, time to move it, or the truck's not full, let's put some more stuff on it if we can before we miss the deadline for it to get to its next destination. And, sometimes the AI is, like you said, Bob, it's making the heavy work easy to get to what seems like a very common sense decision. But in order to get to that common sense decision, that reduction of burden is massive. When you're talking, I think you said they have over 5,000 trucks on a daily basis that they're trying to decide move or stay, right? And they just keep running it until they get the trucks moving, right, to the final destination. But it's just interesting how these two tools are complementing. Will they get to the point where the human doesn't have to make the, click the button to say move the truck or keep the truck? Probably, right? At some point in time, they could probably or at least to get to some massive percentage because they're trusting it. And then, then they just have to have the humans maybe investigate the ones that threw up like an anomaly flag. So yeah, it's getting exciting out there. But I heard a presentation 3 years ago from, the guy who went to MIT and then went from MIT to Walmart. And they did a very similar thing, like trying to figure out what to do with their trucks. And just by using their data, they were saving, I thought he said billions, it could have been millions, but it was just such a significant amount of money just by almost doing the same thing. Do we finish loading the truck or do we keep the truck moving? But they're a captive, what I call a captive delivery system to some degree. So, they have their warehouses, they have their time frames, they have their distances, they have their trucks. So it was, but they weren't using the data, and now they are, right? So it's getting exciting. I think in practice like that, where you've got logistics and you got known things, distances between things. Now, you could have an accident, right? You could have a bridge out, things like that. So you can't just build it once and forget it. You'd have to monitor, right? You'd have to have some agents monitoring, are all routes still open, things like that.
Yeah. So what would happen? I think, Stefan, what you're after was like if you've got a buyer and a seller and their AIs connect, would they work out something that was beneficial to both sides and smoother? Or did the rules kind of set by either side kind of still interfere? Because there's a lot of reasons why you order something. Something might be on sale, or you may not have enough space for it if it was to be delivered. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of read what's just digitalizing, right? Using software to do things versus what's really agentic AI, meaning it has autonomy, right? It just starts doing it. It just starts ordering stuff, so the shelves are full again. I don't know, right? But I think on the commercial retail side, it's making a big push, right? Where like this is for the consumers directly, right? So I don't have to go to Amazon, to kind of research what I want to buy. I have my agent doing this, right? But I just wonder in the B2B world, right, where like in these big supply chains, right, where would it take foot there? And in what form? That will just be maybe an interesting kind of brainstorming or maybe fact finding. I just don't know enough about the space. I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if that also gives, there. If you look at, I just go back to just one standards. There's a lot of rich data that could be available, but I don't think a lot of people capture it just because you just can't go over it all the time. I mean, where the cotton came from for your jeans really is not always that important. From an AI perspective, where you're saying your agent is just out there looking for the best jeans or looking for something that you want, they could have the capability of drilling down to some finer level detail to differentiate what they're being offered.
Yeah, and finding deals and all that. Yeah, I mean, again, that's on the commercial consumer side, but that certainly ought to. And maybe it's just not showing up in the B2B world because these large volume contracts are in place already, right, and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, although in the drug world, knowing the API source, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, that's pretty critical.
Yeah.
To your cotton and jean analogy, Bob.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And I would think it's pretty unusual for a pharmacist to be asking about APIs and where they originate from. But in the future world where that button is sitting right in front of them, just tell the AI, here's my laundry list of things I want to know. Sure, I want them all.
Right.
If you've got a trade route disruption, as we're now seeing, or have been seeing, we had the Panama Canal problem. With the Strait of Hormuz, it could be very important to know these little things that, the pharmacist doesn't need to know until the crisis occurs.
Yeah.
And maybe we should say pharmacy team, right, or pharmacy group, but yeah.
Yeah, I saw, what was it last week? Somebody sued one of the AIs because it had given some advice on pharmaceuticals to someone and they got injured. So, liability starts to sneak in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a case in Canada where a family is suing AI for basically encouraging suicide.
Oh, great.
Oh. Was somebody doing a chat to get through like a behavioral health situation, or
basically, yeah.
oh my gosh.
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember Joe Schmitz from Mercy they were doing the agentic AI for doing what's called the S-bar, the handoff between the ED and the patient floor. And when they were talking to Microsoft early on, Microsoft was using an example where some tests were being done by the military, and the AI couldn't finish its mission because the control tower kept saying, no, that's a friendly fire, or that's a friendly. So the AI took out the control tower.
Oh boy, that's where you're following a logic path and not necessarily a.
I think it's good those things happen early, right? Because I hope we find ways to control that, because you wouldn't want to take out the control towers in your bombing routes or something like that.
Interesting.
And they did touch on that at just this recent, where they're trying to put between certain things like that could have crisis results, where it could trigger something, and it could be a chain of events. I mean, they didn't say a nuclear attack, but it was like saying stop the AI before the physical button could be depressed.
Mm. Yeah, I guess somebody will sooner or later run some tests to see whether the AI is, from a probabilistic point of view, is it any better or worse than the randomness you get from humans too?
It'll probably be more traceable to
Yeah,
the source.
I have to drop,
right.
folks. Have a good
Okay.
weekend.
Okay, see you, Kevin. Right.
Yeah, you're right.
They definitely have the ability to trace back to what was the actuator. And that's probably going to be why it's going to come under scrutiny quickly.
Yeah, I guess at some point we should talk about the legal aspects of this, how much information you have to capture, like those memory files or the I use these session files, which are, you could audit them and determine where a decision was made and why.
Well, Bob, I think we've lost about half of the original group.
That's all right. Yeah, so we'll be off next week, and then we'll come back with Swami. I don't know if you remember Swami from some of the earlier discussions we had, but it'll be, being as AI was a bit of a niche back then, and now it's, we're all AI experts. It'll be interesting to see what's going on in his world.
Are you gonna actually retract the call for those that aren't on the call this week? So, because I have the 7th on my calendar.
Yeah, I will. I'll cancel that call.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate having this discussion with. I mean, you would say you'd like to have a bunch of people on this call, but I don't know if there's that many people that are pushing the envelope yet. So, so far so good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right, have a good weekend.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. See you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.